hospital lobby was always alive with movement. Patients shuffling in, nurses rushing with charts, families whispering anxiously in corners. But for Clara, the black cleaning lady, this rhythm was nothing new. She had worked these halls for over a decade, pushing her mop bucket past the bustle, her presence blending into the background like the beige walls she polished every morning. People saw her uniform and assumed that was all she was, someone meant to clean up after others. They didn't know her mind was sharp, her eyes sharper still. That morning felt different. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead as Clara bent down to wipe a streak of mud from the tiled floor near the ER entrance. Her back ached, but she kept working, humming an old gospel tune under her breath. Doctors swept past, calling for scans, blood tests, and orders she could barely pronounce. Yet, Clara's attention wasn't on the chaos of the staff. It was on a man sitting slouched in the corner. He was pale, sweating profusely, and clutching his chest. Not dramatically, like in the movies, but quietly. Too quietly. His fingers trembled, his lips dry. People walked past him, a receptionist sliding paperwork, a nurse guiding another patient, even a doctor who glanced at him and dismissed it as exhaustion. But Clara stopped. She paused mid-wipe, her mop dripping on the floor, her instincts screaming that something wasn't right. She told herself, "You've seen sick before. This ain't just tired. This is different." Clara had no medical degree, no stethoscope, no badge of authority. What she had was observation. Over the years, she had noticed patterns in the sick, the way people looked when they were about to faint, the sound of someone's breathing when it was about to turn into a collapse. She remembered one patient months ago who was rushed in blue-lipped, and the same damp sheen of sweat had been on his forehead before he went unconscious. Her heart pounded. Should she speak up? Who would even listen to her? Too often she had been waved off. "Don't worry about it, Clara," they'd say, or worse, ignore her altogether. She was just the cleaning lady. But something inside her refused to let go. She pushed her cart closer to the man. "Sir, you okay?" she asked softly, her voice calm, steady. He barely lifted his head. I'm fine," he whispered hoarsely. But his eyes told another story. His pupils seemed dull, his breath shallow, each inhale a struggle. Clara didn't hesitate anymore. She turned toward the nurse's station, raising her voice just enough to be heard. "Somebody needs to look at him. Now." The nurse behind the desk barely glanced up. "We'll get to him. Please stay clear, ma'am." Her chest tightened. The indifference stung, but the man's condition was worsening by the second. His hand slipped off his lap, and his shoulders sagged like his body was giving up. Clara knew if she walked away, he might not survive. She stepped forward, firmer this time. "No, you don't understand. He's not fine. He's having something serious, maybe his heart. Look at him." The urgency in her voice finally caught attention. A young intern, barely out of med school, walked over with hesitation. He glanced at the man, then back at Clara. "What makes you think?" Before he could finish, the man lurched forward, groaning in pain, his body trembling. The intern's eyes widened. "Get a gurney," he shouted. Suddenly, the lobby exploded into motion. Nurses rushed in, monitors wheeled out, and doctors gathered around, barking orders. Clara stepped back, her hands gripping her mop handle, her breath shallow. She watched as they lifted the man onto a stretcher, attaching wires and masks. The beeping machines confirmed what she already feared. His heart was in distress. As the team whisked him away toward the emergency bay, one of the senior doctors muttered to the intern, "Good call spotting that." Clara stood frozen, her lips parting slightly. She wanted to correct them, to say it wasn't the intern who spotted it was her. But she stayed silent, like always. Yet deep inside, she knew the truth. If she hadn't spoken, that man might not have survived the waiting room. Still gripping her mop, Clara whispered to herself, "Don't ever ignore what you see." The floor around her gleamed spotless, but all she could think about was the man's pale face, the way everyone else had walked past. They didn't notice. They didn't care. But she did. And for now, that had to be enough. Clara tried to shake the moment off, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling as she scrubbed a coffee stain from the counter in the break room. The memory of that man's face drained, begging silently for help, clung to her like the scent of bleach on her apron. She kept hearing his weak whisper, "I'm fine." She knew better. People always said that when they were anything but fine. Moments later, the intern from earlier entered, his white coat slightly wrinkled, his stethoscope swinging as he poured himself some water. He looked at Clara curiously, then spoke. "You were the one who noticed him first, right?" Clara froze. I just thought he looked bad." The intern smiled faintly. "You didn't just think. You were right. He was having the early stages of a myocardial infarction, a heart attack. If you hadn't said anything, he might have gone into full arrest in that chair." The words made Clara's knees weak. She had been right, deadly right. She tightened her grip on the rag in her hand, unsure whether to feel proud or terrified. "Most people ignore those subtle symptoms," the intern continued, sipping his water. "Even trained staff. You've got an eye, ma'am. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." He left as quickly as he came, his pager buzzing. Clara stood there, staring at the wall, her chest swelling with something new. For the first time in years, someone had acknowledged her instincts, not as a cleaning lady, but as a human being who saw something everyone else missed. But outside that break room, reality was less kind. When Clara returned to the lobby, she overheard two nurses whispering near the reception desk. "Did you hear? That janitor's sticking her nose where it doesn't belong again." "Yeah, she's lucky it didn't backfire. She should leave the medicine to the doctors." Clara pretended not to hear, her face impassive, but her heart sank. She wasn't trying to play hero. She wasn't trying to make anyone look bad. She just cared. Maybe too much. Still, she couldn't help but wonder, what if she had walked away? What if she had silenced her gut feeling? That man's life might have been over in minutes. Later that afternoon, as she wheeled her cart down the pediatric ward, she saw families huddled by their children's bedsides. She thought about her own son, Marcus, now grown and working miles away. When he was young, Clara used to watch him breathe at night, terrified that if she closed her eyes, she'd miss the moment something went wrong. That fear, that instinct to notice the small things, had never left her. And now, maybe it had saved a stranger's father, a husband, a brother, someone who mattered to somebody. She sighed deeply, resuming her mopping, her heart carrying both the weight of dismissal and the quiet pride of knowing she did the right thing. Stories like Clara's remind us of something powerful. Sometimes, the people everyone overlooks are the very ones who make the biggest difference. If you're feeling this story so far, don't just let it pass by. Hit that subscribe button and join our community. We bring you more real, emotional stories that open eyes and change perspectives. The next morning, Clara walked back into the hospital with a heaviness she couldn't quite name. She half expected the man from yesterday to be gone, swallowed by the silence that too often followed patients who didn't make it. But to her surprise, as she passed the recovery ward, she caught a glimpse of him. Sitting up in bed, oxygen tube resting gently on his nose, his wife at his side clutching his hand. His color had returned, his eyes clearer now. Clara lingered at the door, her heart pounding. She didn't step in, didn't say a word. She just watched from afar, relief flooding her. The wife leaned toward the man, tears in her eyes. "They said you could have, if not for someone noticing in time." The man nodded slowly, his gaze soft, filled with gratitude she could almost feel through the glass. Clara pressed her lips together, whispering silently, "You're welcome." She pushed her cart forward before anyone noticed her, slipping back into her role, the woman in the background. The one no one clapped for, no one credited. Yet, she knew what she had done. And that was enough. Or, at least, it should have been. Because soon, she'd face another moment that would test her instincts again. Only this time, it wouldn't be in the quiet corner of a waiting room. It would happen where everyone could see, and where no one could ignore her anymore. The hospital was quieter that evening, but Clara could feel the weight of unspoken tension in the air. The man she had noticed yesterday was stable, yes, but something about the way the staff carried themselves told her his case had rattled them. Maybe it was guilt, maybe embarrassment, but no one dared to say it aloud. Clara just did what she always did, pushed her cart, wrung out her mop, kept her head down. But her eyes? They were everywhere. She passed the surgical wing and spotted another patient, a teenager this time, sitting slouched in a wheelchair, his mother flipping through paperwork beside him. Clara noticed his lips moving slowly, as though whispering to himself. His skin seemed clammy, his movements sluggish. She hesitated. Was she seeing things again? Or was this another sign no one else had noticed? Her heart sped up. Not again, she thought. Not today. She wanted to step in, to speak up, but her throat tightened. The whispers of the nurses from yesterday echoed in her head, that janitor's sticking her nose where it doesn't belong. She clenched her rag tighter, fighting the battle between doubt and instinct. This time, before she could decide, a nurse approached the boy and checked his vitals. Clara exhaled deeply, realizing she wasn't the only one watching. Relief washed over her. Maybe yesterday had made the staff more careful. Maybe they were starting to notice too. She turned away, her chest easing slightly, and walked down the corridor. That night, Clara sat on the edge of her bed at home, staring at her hands. They were calloused, worn from years of scrubbing and polishing, but they had saved a life. Her son Marcus called on the phone just then, his voice crackling through the line. "Ma, you sound tired. Everything okay?" Clara forced a small laugh. "Just another long day, baby." She didn't tell him about the man. She didn't tell him about how close death had come to the waiting room. She didn't want him worrying. But she did whisper softly, "Just promise me you'll always listen to your body. Don't ignore it here." Marcus chuckled. "Yes, Ma. You always worry too much." She smiled faintly, her heart aching with both pride and fear. Before we go further, let me pause and ask you, our audience, where are you watching this story from? Are you listening from home, at work, or maybe even on a late-night drive? Drop your city or country in the comments. It helps us see how far stories like Clara's are traveling, connecting people across the world. The next day, Clara returned to the hospital, her head held a little higher. She still felt invisible to most, but she carried a private confidence, the knowledge that her instincts had made a difference. And sometimes, even if the world doesn't clap for you, you have to clap for yourself. But fate wasn't finished with her yet. As she rounded a corner near the cardiology wing, she overheard raised voices. A group of doctors surrounded a chart, debating furiously. "His numbers don't make sense," one of them barked. Another insisted, "It's dehydration, nothing more." Clara's ears perked. She glanced into the room. Another patient lay motionless, his chest rising unevenly, his skin taking on the same pale sheen she'd seen before. Her pulse quickened. She gripped her mop handle like it was an anchor. Was she really about to do this again? Step into their world, where she didn't belong, and risk the ridicule? Her eyes locked on the man's shallow breaths. His chest stuttered, paused, then jerked again. Clara knew that rhythm, or rather, the lack of rhythm. It was the body waving a red flag, begging for attention. Her decision was already made. Clara took one deep breath, stepped into the room, and said firmly, "Check his heart." Now, the doctors whipped around, stunned. One of them sneered, "Excuse me? This is a restricted area." But Clara didn't budge. Restricted or not, he's fading. Look at him. The room fell silent for a second that stretched like an eternity. Then, as if on cue, the patient's monitor let out a sharp alarm. The line began to dip, his breathing faltered. Panic erupted. Doctors scrambled, pushing Clara aside, rushing in with crash carts and defibrillators. She stumbled back, her chest heaving, tears stinging her eyes. Once again, she had seen it before anyone else. Once again, her voice had cut through the noise. This time, though, there were witnesses. Too many to dismiss her as a nuisance. And what happened next would change everything. The sharp beep 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 of the monitor filled the room as the doctor scrambled. "Charge to 200, someone barked. The crash cart rolled closer, paddles slapped with gel. Clara stood in the doorway, her heart thudding so loudly she swore the whole hospital could hear it. The patient on the bed jerked as the defibrillator fired. His body lifted, then fell back against the mattress. The monitor screamed again, jagged lines flickering. Again. Clara clutched her apron tightly, her knuckles pale. She had seen this scene before in countless hospital dramas on TV, but this wasn't fiction. This was life on the line. She wanted to close her eyes, but she couldn't. She was tethered to the man's fragile breaths, as though they were her own. The second shock came. Then, mercifully, the jagged line steadied. A faint, rhythmic tone returned. The room exhaled all at once. The lead doctor, sweat dripping down his brow, leaned against the rail of the bed. His eyes scanned the patient, then drifted, reluctantly, toward Clara. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and undeniable. Everyone in that room knew it. She had called it before they did. "Who let her in here?" another doctor muttered, breaking the tension. But the words fell flat. No one laughed. No one brushed her off this time. Because they had all seen it. The janitor had spotted the signs when they hadn't. Clara felt the heat of their stares, a mix of disbelief, resentment, and something else. Respect. She wanted to shrink back, to disappear, but another part of her, buried for years, wanted to stand tall. She whispered to herself, "I only said what I saw." The story spread quickly through the hospital, like wildfire. Staff in the cafeteria whispered about it. Orderlies shared it in the elevators. Even visitors repeated the tale. The cleaning lady who spotted what the doctors nearly missed. Some rolled their eyes, dismissing it as luck. Others admitted, grudgingly, that maybe she had a gift. By the end of her shift, Clara felt the eyes of strangers linger on her as she pushed her mop bucket down the hall. But for the first time, those stares weren't invisible dismissals. They carried curiosity, maybe even admiration. When she got to the staff lounge, the young intern from the day before approached her again. His face lit up with a half-smile. "Twice now," he said softly. "You've saved 2 people. Don't let anyone make you think it doesn't matter." Clara blinked, her throat tightening. Words wouldn't come, so she nodded, grateful for at least one ally. And before we continue with what happened next, let me ask you something. If Clara's story has touched you so far, if it reminds you of the power of speaking up, even when others dismiss you, don't forget to subscribe and share this story. That way, more people across the world can hear stories like this one, stories that prove everyday heroes exist in places we least expect. The following morning, Clara arrived at the hospital with her heart in her throat. She half expected to be called into some supervisor's office and scolded for overstepping. After all, it wouldn't be the first time someone told her to know her place. But when she walked through the ER doors, she noticed something unusual. Heads turning, whispers pausing, eyes following her. Then, as she passed the recovery ward, she froze. The first man, the one she'd spotted in the waiting room, sat up in bed, smiling weakly, his wife feeding him soup. And in the next wing, the second patient, the one who'd flatlined, was alive, groggy, but breathing. Their families looked at them with teary gratitude. But their eyes, just for a flicker of a second, shifted to Clara as she passed. Recognition. Silent, but powerful. Her steps slowed, her chest swelling with a mix of pride and humility. For once, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. But fate had one more test in store. A final moment that would either prove Clara was more than a cleaning lady, or silence her forever. And when it came, everyone, from the nurses to the doctors to the families, would be watching. The hospital buzzed with its usual rhythm, stretchers rolling, pagers beeping, announcements echoing through the intercom. But for Clara, the air felt heavier that day. After 2 near miracles, she sensed something lingering, as though life was about to hand her another test. By noon, the storm arrived. A sudden shout erupted near the cafeteria. People rushed to the commotion, visitors gasping, nurses calling for help. Clara dropped her mop and ran toward the sound. There, in the middle of the crowd, a man had collapsed to the ground. His face was flushed red, his breathing ragged, his movements jerky. Panic filled the room. "Seizure," someone yelled. But Clara's eyes locked on the man's neck, the way his veins bulged, his chest straining. No, this wasn't just a seizure. She had seen this before in documentaries, in cases whispered about by nurses she'd overheard. This was something far deadlier. Stroke. Clara shouted. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "It's a stroke." For a moment, no one moved. Then a doctor shoved through the crowd, kneeling beside the man. He glanced at Clara, his face skeptical. "How do you?" "Look at his face," she snapped, pointing. "One side's drooping. His speech is slurred. He needs clot-busting meds now." The doctor froze, then looked closer. His eyes widened. She was right. "Get neurology down here," he barked. The crowd scattered as staff rushed into action. Within seconds, the man was hoisted onto a gurney, wheeled away toward emergency treatment. Clara stood rooted to the spot, her chest rising and falling, her apron damp with sweat. Around her, silence hung. The bystanders, families, nurses, orderlies, even a few doctors, turned to look at her. No one laughed this time. No one dismissed her. They had all seen it. The janitor had been the first to call it. The one voice that saw what others ignored. For the first time, Clara didn't look away. She held their stares, her chin lifting slightly. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She was just doing what she always did, noticing the details. But now, the world was noticing her back. Later that evening, as Clara finished mopping the quiet halls, the hospital director approached her. A tall woman with sharp eyes and a calm authority. She stopped right in front of Clara's cart. "Mrs. Thomas?" the director said. Clara stiffened. "Yes, ma'am." The director's gaze softened. "I've been hearing about you. 3 patients. 3 times you spoke up. You saved lives." Clara opened her mouth, but no words came. No one had ever spoken to her like this before, not in this building. The director continued, "We want to offer you something. Not a doctor's coat, not a nurse's badge. But training, real medical training for support staff. Observation skills like yours shouldn't go to waste." Clara's eyes burned with tears. She nodded slowly, her voice breaking. I just didn't want them to die." The director smiled faintly. "And that's exactly why you belong here." The next morning, Clara wheeled her mop bucket through the lobby like she always had. The floors still needed cleaning. The walls still needed polishing. But something was different. As she passed, nurses nodded. Doctors gave her small smiles. Families whispered with gratitude. She wasn't invisible anymore. And though she wore the same uniform, carried the same mop, she felt taller, prouder. Because she knew that sometimes heroes don't wear capes or scrubs or lab coats. Sometimes they wear aprons and push carts. And sometimes the lives they save are the ones everyone else overlooked. The end.